Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the NBA Finals between the Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. As the Celtics win their 18th ring, they take down the Mavericks in 5 games in a dominant series for them. We're going to move out of the NBA here, but before we do, there was a question from Kelsey in the chat. She says, do you think we can see a repeat of Boston versus Dallas? I think absolutely we can. We've talked about how Boston is going to basically keep the same roster together, and they are going to be a super team for the next foreseeable future. But it's going to be a tougher road for Dallas. That Western Conference is only going to continue to get better. The Western Conference was already tougher than the East to begin with, but it's going to be a very it's going to be a tough road. I think it's absolutely possible. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's much easier for Boston to get back than it is going to be for Dallas too. But like I was saying, we are going to move into some football talk here, talking a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk and his excuse me, talk about Brandon Aiyuk and his drama with the 49ers here. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all, go ahead and throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off get into some NFL talk here, talking a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk and his situation with the 49ers. The 49ers have a very tough decision to make here at wide receiver, right? Brandon Aiyuk is a guy who started off his career a little bit slowly. Coming out of the gates, coming out of Arizona State, he had a couple down years. Now a lot of that isn't on him. Some of that is the quarterback situation. Some of that is the play calling. Some of that is just the way that the ball was going. Some of it was injuries. Deebo Samuel had his big year a couple years ago. Christian McCaffrey continues to have his big year, but last year Brandon Aiyuk really broke out. He was the seventh highest leader in the NFL in receiving yards last season, and now he's looking to get paid. And the issue is the 49ers have a lot of other needs that they need to deal with before Brandon Aiyuk. They have to deal with, they have already paid this offseason a cheap deal for Juwan Jennings, who does a lot at wide receiver, is kind of an underrated guy. They've extended Christian McCaffrey. They continue to have wrestle with the issue at quarterback. They got to pay Brock Purdy soon. Brock Purdy is coming up on his next contract date. It's going to be a interesting discussion there to see if and how much they pay him. They've shown the ability to not pay a quarterback taking them to the Super Bowl before. They let Jimmy G walk. Obviously, back then, they already had Brock Purdy showing up, so it was a little bit of an easier decision. But they're coming up on that decision again. Do they want to make Brock Purdy a very highly paid quarterback in the NFL, a guy that's worth paying $55 million? But all of that kind of goes back to the question at hand for Brandon Aiyuk, which is he wants to get paid, and he wants to get paid now. And if you're in his shoes, I completely understand it, right? You're an NFL wide receiver. You just had a top 10 NFL wide receiver season. You want to get paid like it. But for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, who really that was his one big breakout season. He's had a couple other solid years, but this was the first year last season where he really had one of those seasons where you can say, okay, he's a part of some of the better receivers in the NFL. Now, I'm not on the same page. I think Brandon Aiyuk is a guy that's easily replaceable, especially with a guy like Juwan Jennings, who I I do really like. He doesn't do everything the exact same as Brandon Aiyuk can. Brandon Aiyuk is a great receiver, but the 49ers have to figure out how they're going to allocate resources, how they're going to continue to make this a championship team as that roster continues to get more and more expensive. And that's the hardest thing about being an NFL GM, right? In a perfect world, you can build it like a fantasy team. You can have all these great offensive and defensive players. You can have all these guys that you can have all the best players in the world, but in reality, you don't have the money to pay them. Like Eric says, he's not Debo. Debo, well, he might not have the same wide receiver skills. His versatility as a runner in the backfield, his ability to break tackles and be physical, it fits really well with that 49ers system. Brandon Aiyuk, who, while he fits well in that 49ers system, is not a guy that I'm breaking out my pocketbook and writing him a $30 million check, right? And that's what he's asking for. He's a guy that maybe most I'd give him is $20 million. And again, that's still a lot of money for him. I think he's a guy that can be pretty much replaced, especially on a team like the 49ers, where while he seemingly was option number one in the passing game, it seems like that is something that can just get phased out. He was going up against a lot of single coverage because Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey and all these guys were getting all that double coverage, high attention from those safeties, and Aiyuk was able to go one-on-one. If he wants to be paid like a wide receiver one, he's going to have to go somewhere that can make him that wide receiver one where he can prove it. And I don't think the 49ers are in a spot where they're willing to pay. And it seems like Brandon Aiyuk is kind of on the same page as that right now, right? He comes out, he posts a video to TikTok talking to rookie quarterback for the Washington Commanders, Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels, who was drafted by the Commanders second overall this year, former quarterback at Arizona State for Brandon Aiyuk. So he was having this conversation and he says they don't want me. Now, we don't know who they is in this situation. We don't have a lot of context in this situation because nothing more has come out. And you also have to remember that a lot of this is, contract leveraging, trying to get the best deal for your contract, trying to get the most money possible. The agent probably says to post this cause drama. A lot of I live around the Washington D.C. area, so all the sports talk today on the radio, on the local news is about, hey, let's get Brandon Aiyuk to DC. And just because he was talking to Jayden Daniels, which slow your roll on that. There's a lot that have to go into that. There's a reason. I'm sure the 49ers were trying to trade him because it doesn't seem like they want to pay him. And if you're not going to pay a guy, you want to get your some assets back for him, right? Like Eric says, the 49ers have to pay a lot of players, and Aiyuk is at the bottom of that list. That's absolutely right. You have to pay your quarterback. I think that Brock Purdy's a guy that's definitely worth paying. In a perfect world, I'm not giving him $50 million, but you kind of are going to have to give him that $50 million. I think he definitely deserves that high paid money. Debo already got his contract. They just paid McCaffrey. They drafted Ricky Pearsall in the draft this year. They already extended Juwan Jennings. It seems like they're preparing to let Brandon Aiyuk go from every single move they've already made. They don't really have enough money to go in the books. They're going to have to extend some of their defensive players soon. So to keep that great defense together. And this is the cost of being this is the cost of being a Super Bowl team. You're going to have these great players that are going to leave. You're going to have these great players that you want to stay and you want to keep, but you just don't have the ability to do it because they want more money than you're able to offer. And unfortunately, I think Brandon Aiyuk falls into that situation. I think that the 49ers are asking a little more from teams in the trade market than most teams are willing to pay. If I was trading for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, excuse me, I'm not giving up more than, a third round pick for him. And I'm sure they're looking for a second round pick for a guy like that. And it doesn't hurt to have him play out his contract. I believe he's got a year or two left on his deal. So it isn't the end of the world, but unless something major happens, unless something shifts, it doesn't seem like he is going to get paid. And he'll play this season, right? And then he'll go enter free agency and he'll get paid somewhere else. I guarantee you somebody will pay for his services because he is a good receiver. You don't get to be top 10 in receiving yards by not being a good receiver, right? He has to back it up this year because last year really is his only good year of proving that he has that ability. But if he's able to back it up this season, he's going to be on the list, the short list of receivers to get paid. CeeDee Lamb's going to be next most likely. T. Higgins and him are probably the next two. Again, I'm taking T. Higgins before I'm taking Aiyuk, but Brandon Aiyuk seems like this is going to be his last season with the 49ers. I'd be shocked if they got a trade done before the season starts. Maybe there's a team out there that's willing to give up, and maybe the 49ers lower their compensation, what they're asking for. But I don't really see either of those two things happening. They'll run it back one more time, try and get a ring, and if not, they already have that backup plan. Again, Juwan Jennings re-signed. They draft Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. These guys that can that are there to take Aiyuk's spot, So again, we will see what happens in the 49ers, but I have a feeling that this relationship is coming to an end. That's kind of where all roads kind of lead right now. And maybe they work something out. If Brandon Aiyuk decides to ask for less than $30 million, I'm sure they can work something out. I'm sure the Niners are willing to pay him $25 million, but he's probably asking for top receiver money. And if I'm him, I'm not getting off that number unless he really, really wants to stay in San Francisco. But we'll see. It's probably not going to happen until next season. He'll play one more year and enter free agency, and then we'll have a bidding war for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, especially if he's able to build on what he did last season with a great team in San Francisco. So I think this will work out for all parties, honestly. I just think that it's an unfortunate casualty of the NFL cap, right? If there's no cap, they re-sign him, there's no issue. But there is a cap, they have to stay under it, and they have to continue to build a winning team. And unfortunately, Aiyuk is not in the future plans for that. But we'll see what happens. The NFL is crazy, it's unpredictable, just like everything else in sports. That's why we love it. But in our next segment, we're going to finish up our NFL coverage, continue some wide receiver talks, talk about T. Higgins. He signs his franchise tag and seems like he's going to play for the Bengals this year. There were lots of trade talks surrounding him. He's asked for trades. It's a very weird situation there, and it's a little bit of a different situation than the one in San Francisco with the 49ers that we were just talking about. So stick around for that. We'll be right back talking about all of that and more here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.